shipping and transportation and logistics. I'm sure that's been a big talking point for you guys. I guess even pre-COVID, obviously, I've been with TCC personally 5.5 going on 6 years, and logistics and trucking and the driver shortage and whatnot has been a big topic of conversation throughout that entire time frame and even beyond that. So I know logistics has been a big question mark, especially in the chemical industry, but obviously with all industries that rely on these different modes of transportation. Sounds like there's both some good and some bad news going on in the logistics world. I'll let you decide what you want to start on. But what's currently happening, and what are you spending some time on in the transportation world?
Okay, I'll start with the bad news. Probably the one item we're concerned about is that there's a law that passed in California a couple of years ago, Assembly Bill 5, and that really it had to do with it all started with the whole Uber and Lyft drivers, independent contractors, and but how the bill ended up, well, there was a referendum to exclude Uber and Lyft drivers, but it pretty much applies to everyone else. So there was a big fight over that. The California Trucking Association sued and went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided just a couple of months ago not to take it up. So this law is in effect. And so that really, a lot of truckers are independent contractors. And what this law does is make truckers be actual employees of firms. So this is all just starting to play out. But I know there have been a couple protests out in California. Truckers not happy about this. But whatever the case, it's not going to help the driver shortage at all. So
Yeah.
that's one piece of bad news. The other items we're concerned about, there are a couple of labor disputes going on. One is on the West Coast ports. The agreement between the Pacific Maritime Association and the International Longshore and Warehouse Union expired as of June 30th. So good news there is that there's been no work stoppage, but these negotiations are kind of dragging on, and we're concerned that if the parties don't reach agreement soon, we could see slowdowns. That happened last time this occurred in about 2015. There was kind of there wasn't a complete stoppage, but there was a real slowdown, which caused a lot of grief, a lot of delays in products. And this was even before the current crisis. And then even worse than that, there's a dispute between the Class 1 freight railroads and the 12 major rail worker unions. And they've been negotiating for, I think, years now. And just recently, a presidential emergency board was formed to hammer out a settlement between these two groups. And that board just came out with their proposal last week and proposed a pretty substantial increase for rail workers. So now that's they have 30 days to consider that. And if there's disagreement, which now we're hearing that some unions like it, some don't, the earliest there could be a strike would be September 16th. But if the rail workers go on strike, that I can't even imagine what a disaster that would be for our commerce. So we're watching that. There's also the opportunity for Congress to get involved. If they can't reach an agreement, Congress can say, all right, well, you're going to accept this. This is the way it's going to be. So be on the lookout in the next 3 weeks to see what happens with that. We're hoping for the best on that end.
Yeah, that's a good piece of info. We actually just we have kind of regular internal railcar meetings somewhat frequently to talk about the rail fleet that we manage internally and how things are going and whatnot. And that actually came up was someone hearing that there was movement on the rail strike thing and that it may get worse in the next couple of weeks. So that's a good kind of data point that September 16th is that date. And there's going to be a lot to keep an eye on here the next couple of weeks to see how that goes. Obviously, logistics has been tight. Rail especially has been a bit difficult. And obviously a rail strike with some of the major rail unions would be a big problem.
Yes, it would. Yeah, and as you said, the rail outside of this has been a real problem. Anyway, the U.S. Surface Transportation Board has really been closely watching this. They had a big hearing, a 2-day hearing at the end of April, urgent issues in rail service, and had rail customers. They had the railroads testify. They wanted the CEOs to come in, but they didn't show up. But they wanted the railroads to come in and explain themselves. So they sent their people to do that. And then most of the witnesses were rail customers. I actually testified for NACD along with one of our members, Hawkins, who uses a lot of rail, and yeah, we all had horror stories to tell. So once at the end of that hearing, the chairman of the board, Marty Overman, said, "Well, I want rail service improvement plans from all of you Class 1 railroads. How are you going to increase your workforces, improve service?" And they have been providing those reports, but everything I've seen, Chairman Overman says he's not satisfied with the progress they're making. And
Yeah.
we've heard several cases from members about problems they're having getting product, and even having to stop production for a day or two if because they don't have the product to process. It's a really bad situation.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like there's at least somewhat actions being taken to try to improve that. I mean, it sounds like steps in the right direction, even if they haven't been satisfactory up till this point. I guess you got to start somewhere, and it sounds like at least things are being done to at least hear the the general public and people that are directly being impacted by this and try to make some improvements.
Yeah, the STB is definitely keeping the pressure on, and they also have some regulatory proposals that they're working on to try to improve the situation, dealing with reciprocal switching and first mile, last mile service. Those are kind of long-term projects, but that should help in the long run.
Yeah. Is that the end of the bad news, or is there any more
Uh,
bad news to report on?
I think that's the end of the bad news.
All right, let's
So
something that doesn't happen, it seems, very often on our podcast is good news with shipping and transportation. So tell me some good news.
yeah, well, the president signed into law the Ocean Shipping Reform Act in mid-June, on June 16th, and that law gives the Federal Maritime Commission a lot more authority to go after the ocean carriers who have been, as I'm sure you well know, really jacking up prices and all sorts of terrible delays and not wanting to carry hazmat and things like that. That's been before Superfund came along. That was the number one headache for our members over the past couple of years. But so that was signed into law, and the FMC is really they're focused on implementing this bill. They have a web page with all their implementation plans and activities. They have probably 10 or 12 rulemakings that they're going to be doing over the next few months and year or so. So, I mean, it's not going to be immediate relief, but the attention is really focused a lot more on this issue, holding the ocean carriers' feet to the fire, and hopefully we'll see some improvement there.
Yeah, again, sounds like it's obviously some longer term plays to improve some of these things, but at least the conversations are happening. I know it may not be good news for people that are having issues today or tomorrow or next week with deliveries and shipments, but at least things are being done to try to improve things and give it more oversight and have some action here in the coming months and years.
Yes, and the commission, even before, as this law was being finalized, they've even started to go after some of the ocean carriers, levied some pretty big fines for unreasonable detention and demurrage and things like that. So they're using whatever authority they have to try to provide some relief.
Sure. Good. No, that sounds like positive things are happening to try to improve some of these things and bring costs back down to normal levels and improve, I think, more than anything else, the supply and demand. I think people wouldn't mind maybe paying a bit higher prices if it means stuff will actually get from A to B, but if stuff costs more and it's not actually getting there, that's a problem.
Exactly. Just a note, you mentioned the NACD regional meetings. Our Northeast regional meeting will be held in September in Princeton, New Jersey. And one of the speakers is going to be Carl Bensel, who is one of the Federal Maritime Commission members. So he's one of them. And we've been working really closely with him through this whole process. So hopefully you're planning to attend that so he can give you the latest from the source.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. One of the best things about some of these shows, I know, the events that you guys put on, and we also work closely with the Plastics Industry Association. They do some great kind of targeted speakers on same thing, people that are, some of these agencies that are working on things to fix things, and then more downstream agencies, housing agencies, and automotive agencies, and things like that are working on this stuff. One of the best things about going to some of these shows and conferences is hearing speakers just like that to be able to get that information. So it sounds like a great speaker lineup there.
Yes.
Well, it's nice to have a little bit of good news, even if it's maybe good news to go into effect in 2025. At least there's some bright spots and some
Right.
positive news to take a look at
It
there.
was funny because that passed, we were all happy, and then I think it was maybe the next day we realized that the first Superfund taxes were due on July 29th. So our celebration of the enactment of OSRA didn't last long.
Yeah, right. Well, still something not to go overlooked, I suppose.
That's right.